out for just a little bit. Um, so what was the last thing we were talking about before the internet died?
You were saying that we were looking at the first biomorphic abstraction and how it reminded you of a succulent.
All right. Did we talk any about what needed to be done to it?
I didn't hear anything.
Okay. All right. We're going to go ahead and go back to that. So for attendance, looks like there's going to be at least 2 videos to watch, just because the internet dropped us. But what I was saying, I really like how plant-like. I mean, it feels very strongly inspired by plant forms. One of the things that I would recommend this person do is sand it down so it's smoother, because we can still see some good sized chunks taken out. We don't need to make this completely polished, but I would recommend getting rid of as many of these chatter marks as possible. And you don't need to have it mounted on this. This was one question somebody asked. You don't need to have it mounted on this when you apply the plaster of Paris. I mean, not the plaster, sorry, the paper mache. You can just have this thing by itself. Sometimes people have suspended it with 3 of the skewers while they're doing the paper mache until at least they get the first coating dried. So, but I would recommend that this is sanded down a little bit more, but I really like the form. Right now, this one, I'm thinking this one is pretty decent as well. And I'm sorry, not decent is not intended to be a bad word. I think this one fills the parameters of the assignment because it is organically based. And looking at this, we can see some chatter right here and here. That is a result of the sanding and the way the foam is done. So but you have a mark like this, and it's still a carving mark. So I think that this one is ready to do the paper mache on. And before you do the paper mache, please send images of this to me so that I can double check that. And if I have not graded yours, let me know so I can grade it right away before you apply the paper mache. Because I want to do that. I want to give you the grade on this and make any advice before you apply the paper mache. I think that this one is beautifully done as well. I love these forms. It feels very organic, very smooth. And this person, I don't know how they did this, but they smoothed that really beautifully. I mean, that is super amazing. Nicely done on this one. Very nicely done. And I love how this feels like it could be bones. It feels like it could be um, fleshy plants, and a lot of kinds of things. What's your impression of it, Emily?
I thought it looked like an abstract version of like something dancing. Could be even
Yeah,
two things dancing around each other.
yeah, I like that. I think that this person really nailed it pretty well, and
I
that's
know, right?
true of pretty much everybody that's been turning these in. You guys have done an exceptional job. Yeah, here we go. Okay, this is looking pretty good. This is a little bit more difficult because they're not able to use the foam. On this one, what I would say before, since we've got to still apply the plaster, I would sand this down so it's smoother, like right through here and everything. And I think this is probably going to be an okay shape right through there. But I would go through, make sure that you don't have any flat surfaces, and sand it as smooth as you can get it before applying the paper mache. So I think this one is coming along really well. It reminds me of kind of an abstracted um, fish cracker, and I think it's really interestingly done. Because they used a different material, this almost feels like it's carved out of stone, and I think a little bit more sanding is really going to do a good job on this. I think Dow's is one of the ones that we did look at last week, and I'm really impressed that you guys are doing a great job in nailing this assignment on. Like on this needs to be sanded down quite a bit, but the overall form itself is really well done. And sanding this so that all the flat surfaces are smooth, and getting rid of a lot of these chatter marks and tool marks, smoothing them down. This is going to look really good. I really like this one too. I I I, I don't know. The reason why I'm saying I don't know is I really like this form, but I'm wondering how much more sanding can be done. Have you already, Emily? Have you already tried sanding these areas and smoothing them down?
Yeah, the more I pressed my um, sandpaper in there, the rough it felt like it got rougher looking.
Yeah, and I think
But
that's a problem
yeah,
sometimes with this foam. You get to the point where you sand it as smooth as you can, and when it does start doing that, you've just got to stop and then go to the plaster. And you may have to sand I mean, not the plaster, paper mache. I keep screwing up paper mache and plaster. If I say
it,
plaster again, just know I'm talking about the paper mache. But if you find yourself in that situation where you're sanding it and the sandpaper is starting to chew up more of the foam, then you've gone as far as you can.
yeah.
Then it's a good idea. What you'll do with the paper mache, you'll see it in that video that I made. Some of the areas that I showed, you tear smaller pieces of paper, soak it with the paper mache, and then smooth the paper mache into those with your fingers so that you can kind of fill up those spaces and smooth them out. And then the next morning after it's dried, sand it, because you will be able to get it a lot smoother. So
Yeah.
I love this form. I love the curly cues. I love the folds. It feels organic. It feels like it's abstracted but based squarely on organic and biomorphic components that are very real world. And I think that this turned out well. And I like how with the photography, what's nice about this, it just kind of reminds me of some of those Moody Museum kind of photos where you
Yeah.
have the object is on some sort of a padding, but the sheet takes a little bit of the shape of the padding. I think
Mhm.
that's a nice touch.
Yeah.
I think that turned out well. Okay, so I think I hope that wasn't too fast for people, but it is. Um, I think I'm not going to say I think it's obvious to me that you guys are really aware of what's going on in as far as biomorphic abstraction. I mean, everybody who's turned in their designs, it's obvious that you guys know what you're doing, and I am very grateful for that. So I'm good. I'm glad that we had those discussions, and I'm glad you guys are responding to that and doing that. Now, I do want to. I am going to pull up an object, and so the next thing we're going to um, we're going to shift gears quite a bit away from that because the next thing that I want to talk about is um, doing the uh, artistic critique assignments. And the reason why I want to do this, it says it's due July 25th. It's due before the end of the term, and I want everybody to understand what that is. If you are one of the first 6 people to turn these in, you will get extra credit on them. And I want to demonstrate what we are talking about. Okay, these are the 2 assignments that I'm talking about. And again, I'm sorry, I know I am shifting gears rather abruptly. We just finished talking about the biomorphic carvings. This is something that is coming up that I want people to be aware of. And the artistic critiques, this is when you apply the 4 tools of artistic critique to work that you're looking at. You do it with one of your own works, and you do it with a work that you see in one of the discussion forums for somebody from this class. And it is imperative that this work that you're critiquing be something that is done for this class for this semester. I have had people who were really excited about trips they took to Europe and stuff, trying to do apply thing critiques that they took of objects that they saw in Europe before the semester started and stuff, or even during the semester. And that doesn't count. What counts is when you do this for work that was done for this class this semester. I hope that is completely clear. Now, and you're going to be doing 2 of these, and they only need to be about 3 minutes long. So I'm going to open this up. This is really important. You do not show yourself on screen, and I prefer you don't. What you're going to be doing, though, is you're going to have, or I'll tell you the easiest way to set this up. Set this up as a Teams call, and just with yourself. Pull up an image of one of the things in the class that you see, one of the artworks in the class, and use that as your screen for your Teams call. And the easiest way to do that is do the screen share, like what I'm doing right now. And with that screen share, I'm sorry, I was looking at something else and I lost my momentum of speaking. And with that screen share, you are just going to have an image of the object that you're looking at. And then you are going to record yourself talking through an application of the tools of artistic critique. Now, I'm going to stop sharing for just a minute. We're going to talk about the tools of artistic critique, and then I'm going to give a demo with an image of an object that was turned in for the class this semester. All right. Emily, do you remember what the 4 tools of artistic critique are?
Maybe not in order.
Okay, well, the first one is describe.
Yeah.
And sorry?
Yeah, I knew the first one was just look at it and talk about it.
You look at it and you're basically describing what you're seeing without laying any meaning on it or anything like that. You're just talking about what you're seeing.
Yep.
And the second one is, do you remember what the second one is?
Is it analyze?
Yes, that's exactly right. And in that one, you guys have enough experience doing what you do that you can extrapolate a plausible methodology behind making whatever it is that we're looking at. So, and you can describe how the person is making it, how the person is doing things from your perspective. The third one is interpret. And this is where you start imagining from the things that you, the object that you look at that you described, and then kind of imagining how the person made it. The interpret is where we start talking about what could this possibly mean. And I don't think you can tell all of a person's worldview from an object that they make, but you can extrapolate an idea or a perspective on their worldview and talk about potentially what their worldview is as we look at stuff. And you don't have to describe their politics or anything like that, but you can describe things like, does this represent any emotion? You know, what are the things that the person finds interesting? What is a person trying to communicate a message? Is there a message, or are there just feelings that are being communicated? Or is the person just demonstrating what really good craftsmanship is like? There are a couple of sculptors that I really enjoy whose artwork is intentionally without meaning or intentional meaning, but what they are trying to communicate is just the sheer joy of good craftsmanship. And then the fourth tool, do you remember what the last and final tool is?
Sorry, this is an airplane. I feel like it starts with an E. With an E, like.
Yeah, you're determining whether or not it's successful.
Oh,
You're
okay, cool.
evaluating, and this is
Evaluating. That's what it was.
yeah. And the evaluation happens. That's when we are applying entirely our own opinion. But I think your opinion has a lot of weight when you've already gone through just the process beforehand of describing, analyzing, and interpreting something. Because when you give your opinion, then you can explain and articulate why it is that you feel the way you do. You know, why is this successful? Does it fit the parameters of the assignment from my perspective? Or do you find it successful in its own right as a work of art? And what is also interesting to me is you'll find that when you've gone through those previous three stages, by the time you get to the evaluation, it's no longer just a gut response. You know, you've had time to think about it. And a lot of the times, it's interesting if you, before you go through this process, write down your initial gut reaction, then go through the process and see how you feel about it. Because a lot of the time, after we taken the that period to look, very articulately at something and articulate our responses to something, a lot of the times our opinion either changes completely or is much deeper and more profound than our initial reaction. So I wanted to give a demo on what this might look like. So I just picked the first object I could find, and I will share that with you, and then we will do, you'll see, there we go. Then you'll see what this looks like. Okay, so this is the object. And this is the process you're going to go through, and it's going to be the same whether this is yours or somebody else's that you look at. And I'm going to give you a big hint right now. When you do your own critique, you want to pretend that it's the first time you've ever seen the object and do everything you can to approach it as if you're a complete stranger. All right? Because you will find out that you do much more professional work than you previously thought. Yeah, when you divorce yourself from the fact that you are the creator and you honestly critique your own work, um, that forces you to recognize that you actually did do a pretty good job. Most of the time. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start with this. When you do your own, the target that we're looking at is 3 minutes and over, up to about 5 minutes. 3 to 5 minutes is where we want to go. And when you do this, I would recommend having a printout of those 4 steps: describe, analyze, interpret, and evaluate, with the accompanying questions that they ask right next to you. So you're not going to ask those questions out loud, but as you go through, you are going to answer them out loud. Okay, so I would say I will start with naming this object and who it's from. Is somebody included a title? This looks like it's the Mighty Voltron Revisited, or the paper mache covered carving. And this one is done by Nicole Grimes. I'm trying to get it centered back. Okay, here we go. Describing this, I don't know exactly how tall this is, but from the size of the print, I'm going to guess that this is probably about 8 inches tall and maybe about 4 inches wide. It looks to me, because I know what the assignment is, I know that the core is carved foam, but it looks to me like this is covered with a paper mache that's been sanded down, so it's really smooth. And I can see some of the sanding marks right here and here. So it looks like it's smooth paper mache. The forms themselves feel to me very rounded, very smooth, but they are not static. I mean, these forms look like this was almost like a bicycle seat kind of thing. This form down here is kind of globular, and it looks like they're almost twisting, with this form at the bottom curving up behind and coming forward a little bit. I see a large protuberance that's almost shaped like an organ, the one that I said was almost like a bicycle seat, on the right. And I see a glob on the left at the top. And for the most part, the bottom third is this big round organ-like shape that again seems to me to curve up and behind this bicycle seat shaped thing. It's covered with newsprint that looks like it has some cartoons in it. I don't know if that's integral to the object, but because I don't have a lot of frame context for it, I'm going to assume that it is. And the colors feel like it's less chosen specifically color-wise and more specifically the way the colors were in the newspaper print that was used for the paper mache. Because there doesn't seem to be a consistent color scheme. The font size is consistent with like random newspaper torn things, and rather than any textural quality being developed with the newspaper, it feels to me like it is intended specifically to be an eye-catching cover for whatever the shape is underneath. Okay, so that's description. For analyze, for the analysis, I know that this is for an assignment and that the understructure is carved foam. And it looks to me that this is very, very smooth. So I feel that whoever made this really smoothed the foam out very well before applying the paper mache. And then when they applied the paper mache, it looks like they really worked it in and smoothed it out intentionally to get it just as smooth as possible. And then I could tell in some areas where it's been sanded down, so it's even more smooth. And I like that because to me it demonstrates a real powerful intent in solid construction and craftsmanship. And now I am moving into a little bit of the interpret territory with that, but as far as analysis goes, it looks to me like the strips are about 3/4 of an inch wide. Many of them are long, some of them are shorter, but that seems to be consistent with what they need to have done as part of the paper mache process. So for example, narrower strips in areas where it makes sense to have them narrow, broader strips or shorter strips in the areas where they need to be broader or shorter. And then as we move into interpret, I think that the craftsmanship does speak a bit to the meaning because I don't know if this has any sort of intentional message. It doesn't feel that way to me. It feels to me that this is just an exploration. I'm saying just, but this feels to me that this is an exploration in creating something that is smooth and flowing, that has a smooth surface to it, that is designed intentionally to be a single object that is well crafted, whether or not it has any meaning outside of that. And that's something that we can get away with contemporary art, where it's kind of the postmodern vibe where the content is secondary to the construction. And I think that whoever did this is demonstrating that they'd rather spend the time or to make something smooth, flowing, and intentional than to just slap something together. And perhaps there is a deeper message to that. Maybe there is a message that is something along the lines of what the message is less important than the intent to craft a message. Or maybe sometimes that intention is the important element, and whatever the words might be. There are some words in here, and I think maybe the text from the newspaper being maybe it's intentionally randomized, and that's not the text itself is not the important thing, but the fact that there is text there might be a semblance of a message to it. And I think then it starts becoming almost a conversation on what elements of communication are important. And perhaps it comes down to the idea that the intent to communicate is more important than the words that are said. So I think that would be a very interesting interpretation for this. As far as we evaluate it, for the assignment, the parameters are the size, the materials, and the fact that it's smooth and flowing. And this person did a really good job filling those parameters. And like I said, the craftsmanship is very honest. So I think that this overall is a successful piece. Okay, so that is basically what this assignment looks like. I don't know exactly how long that was. I'm going to see if I can find, get some sort of idea for the time period. I think we did a little bit over 3 minutes for that, and that's fine. If it's much less than 3 minutes, I would do it again, because what we want is 3 to 5 minutes, with a minimum being of 3 minutes. And if you, and I would say if it's much longer than 5 minutes, it's probably not going to do well grade wise, because then you're just showing off. I don't think this needs to be much more than 3 to 5 minutes. But we do need to make sure that we have all 4 of those steps in there. We need to answer the questions, or at least some of the questions that you see under each of those tools that are on the worksheet. And I would say use your precise language as much as you possibly can. So if you talk about the different sizes of the newspaper strips like I was, then talk about some of them are narrow and long, some of them are short and wide. You know, but be specific in what you're talking about. And again, when you're going to be doing 2 of these. One is a critique on your own work that was done, an object that you've made for this class this semester. And the other one is critiquing somebody else's work, an object that was made for this class for this semester. And what I'm not requiring is for you to use your own voice. If you want to have somebody else do this, or you want AI to read it for you, that is perfectly fine. But I do need you to type it out. There have been a couple times where it looks like it was an AI response that somebody did in one of the essay question, like a first paragraph of an essay or something like that. I don't really, I want people to use AI as a tool to help you do stuff, but don't let it replace you. So if you're going to have AI read your critique while you're filming, that's perfectly fine. But you need to be the one who writes the critique. So you need to provide the script for the AI to read. Or you can have like a roommate or a family member read it for you. But does that make sense, Emily? Everything that we talked about?
Yep, totally.
Okay.
Is it 3 to 5 minutes for you and for the other persons?
Right. So a 3 to 5 minute video of you critiquing one of your own works, you turn that in. Then a 3 to 5 minutes of you critiquing somebody else's work, and then you turn that in.
Mm-hmm. Okay, got it.
All right. So, and if we go back to this page, there's a couple things that I want you to look at. All right. If you go to this page, this is the assignment page, Artistic Critique My Own Work. This is the video where those 2 art professors are doing this process with the reclining figure by Henry Moore. And then there's also, you go to this link and it takes you to the Tools of Artistic Critique page. And then please, I think that this playlist is still working. If it's not, let me know. And I will replace this with direct links to several videos so you guys can see examples of what people have done in this class before. All right. Now I hope that this makes a lot of sense. Again, when you do yours, pretend it's the first time you've ever seen it, and you can use any of the images from the discussion posts that we've been using throughout the class. All right. So does that all that make sense, Emily? I'm asking again
Yep.
because I added some more.
Yep. No, that makes sense.
Okay, good. Now I know that we've gone through a couple quizzes. We've looked at quizzes before. Did we did do this quiz, didn't we? We went over this quiz, right?
We've done, I think, everything except the conceptual art quiz.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and go through the conceptual art quiz. This one, it also is talking, it brings in colors and different things like that as well. Most of you are very conversant with 2D art, so color should not be an issue. But I want you to refer to the text because on this one, I'm hoping you can see this page. On this one, there is some language that is specific to the text that we want to have. And all of you should be very familiar with this. So instead of Googling this, look it up in the text. And again, there's 6 copies of the textbook over in the Fulton Library that you guys can access, as in addition to the copies that you guys picked up and everything like that. And there's been, I'm going to say almost everybody is really good about this. There's a couple quizzes where it looked like the person was just looking up answers from the internet. And you're not going to get the points for that. It is really important that you access the actual text from the class. So when we go through this, the tricky ones on here are A and F. Simultaneous contrast. Emily, do you know what that is?
I don't. I haven't read this one yet.
Well, this is something that was really popular during op art, the op art movement in the 60s, where it's basically 2 colors are being used in contrast to each other, where they have pretty much equal weight and they both play off and emphasize the other color. So that's something that is talked about in the textbook, and I think that it is talked about in reference to op art, which was optical illusion art, basically. And that's a really important one to do. You know, we talked about several different kinds of color schemes that we last week, and simultaneous contrast works really well with colors that are either complementary or are really harsh against each other and force you to concentrate on one and then the other. And then subtractive color mixing, there's additive and subtractive color mixing. Additive is when you're making colors with light, and subtractive is when you're making colors with pigment. So a difference is going to be additive color mixing is when you do something on the computer, and subtractive is going to be when you do something with paint. And the explanation for that comes from the textbook. So refer to the textbook and look at that and see why that is subtractive color mixing. Do you know what Roy G. Biv is?
Isn't it the acronym for the colors in the rainbow?
Yes, that's right. Originally, this question was how old and how old is he, and nobody was getting that last part, so I cut it off. But Roy G. Biv has been around since the beginning of the energy initiation of the universe, the Big Bang. Do you know what a ready-made is and who pioneered them? Now, you mentioned you haven't gotten to this, the textbook. A ready-made, this is part of the conceptual processes thing, and we'll talk about it a lot more. A ready-made is an object that is essentially unchanged by the artist outside of context. The artist just gives it a brand new context. So it's a pre-made object that the artist turns on its side or puts on a pedestal or photographs in black and white with a really dynamic angle to give it a new life and context. The person who first did it was Marcel Duchamp. He actually made about a little bit over a dozen of these. And one of my favorites, look it up, is called In Advance of a Broken Arm. I really like that one. And his most famous one was actually the second or third one he did, where he was walking by an apartment that was being refurbished, and he saw that somebody was throwing away a urinal. So he took the urinal, cleaned it up, I hope, and took some enamel and signed it R. Mutt, and then put it in the Paris Salon the next day and called it the Fountain, where it's a urinal that was just placed on its side and given a new context with the title and writing the author, pretend creator's name on the side. And the reason why this is important is we've talked about conceptual art is where you are sculpting the ideas of the individual who is the viewer. And when you are taking something that people see all the time and giving it a fresh context, giving it a fresh story, giving it a new identity, then you're essentially making a new object, even though the physicality of the object itself is unchanged. You're fundamentally transforming how people relate to it. And that's why it was such an important thing that Marcel Duchamp did. There's lots of reasons why people choose to use found materials to make art. The two main reasons are, one, specifically out of the textbook. So, read that portion of it. And then these color schemes, what is really important about these is these are the different color schemes that are being referenced. And each of them is only going to be used once, and one of them is not used at all. Okay, so I believe that's the case. No, well, there's 7 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's 8 of these, and there's only 7 color schemes. But what I need you to only use one once and double check your spelling. Because if you don't spell it correctly, like complementary and split complementary, if you don't double check your spelling, the computer's going to grade it as a loss or as a 0. And I do go through a double check and give you points even if it's misspelled. But do the best you can. So you're not going to use any of these words more than once. So the row and leave circle on this one, it's not going to be achromatic because there's definitely color scheme. It's not going to be discordant because they do flow together. It's not complementary or split complementary at all. Which of these two, Emily, do you think this color scheme is?
Between monochromatic and analogous, I think it's probably
Yes.
analogous because it's not.
Yeah,
it's not one color.
It's definitely not monochromatic. So yeah, since we've ruled out all these others, it's analogous. Now we know that we're not going to be using analogous again for the rest of it. Now here's one that's interesting. It's on the same lines, but it's not analogous. Here we have this one. So I'm not going to answer all these for everybody, but I want you to look at these, pay attention to the words that you're using, and know that you're not only going to use each one only once. And each of these do have very specific color scheme that's used, and it's unless if you don't pay attention at all, you'll screw it up. But most of you are very conversant with 2D and color, So that should not be a problem. And then here, we're talking about applied or natural colors. And some of them are obvious, some of them less so. And then this is where we start getting into contemporary processes and contemporary art, i.e. Conceptual work. And here I'm just asking you to explain the differing use of found materials. And found materials are in reference to found objects, like that earlier question, where the artist is taking things and essentially building a three-dimensional collage from stuff that other people have made before them. And these two, this Betty Saar is one of my very favorite people in the world, but they use the stuff that other people throw away in very different ways. And this, Fran Krill, I love her stuff because even though it looks like an object, you know, it's in a little plastic baggie and it's sold on a cheap rack at any, like you'd see at any beachside store, you know, for tourists. But it's something that really makes you think. And so think about that when you answer this. And I love Fran's sense of humor. She's talking about a very serious thing, but she does it with a little bit of a sense of humor that I think is very engaging. And then George Siegel, he is doing something where these are almost identical. But Emily, when you look at these, do they feel the same? Does this feel the same as this, even though they're almost identical?
No.
And a big reason for that is that George Siegel is very aware of all the weight we give to color and how things go together. And so when you write 3 to 4 sentences on this, be aware of what colors mean and use that to express yourself. So that's what that one is. And then I did want to, let's see, we have about a half an hour. What I would very much like to do is talk, answer questions that you might have, but there's a couple things that I want to go over as we edge towards conceptualism. And I want to watch something, a couple things. I think it's really important that we watch it. Or I'm looking at this thing. Some of the links are not working right. So give me just a second here. Okay, I'm trying to find a couple people have really helped me quite a bit where you've told me very specifically, hey, these links are not working. And I am very grateful for that. And I've gone through and I've changed them as much as I could. But I'm trying to find a specific thing right now that I do have a link for. Let's see. Okay, hold on a second. Okay, we're going to watch this, and I'm going to put it in your in the attendance thing as well. So I want you to, if this is not showing up on our YouTube video, I want you to watch it specifically in the attendance assignment for today. And this is Plato's Allegory of the Cave. But before we get to that, Emily, do you have any questions about the stuff that we've covered so far?
Not anything so far. I have a couple questions for later, but not yet.
Okay. Okay. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. Clement Greenberg was a art critic in the 50s. who is really a champion for non-content postmodern art. He said if you didn't respond to it immediately, well, he's credited with promoting the idea if you didn't respond to it immediately, it's not worth it. And his stuff is a lot deeper than that. I think that's a really kind of an unfair assessment. But one thing that I've noticed, and I'm referring back to our critiques that we are doing, it is interesting to me that a lot of the times you can have an initial response to something, and then when you let it sit and think about it and articulate what you're thinking about it, it becomes more meaningful to you and it becomes more important to you. And I'm hoping that that's the response that you get through this class as you look at things, that you don't just look at them and move on, but think about them critically. And those 4 steps in Fredmont's Tools of Artistic Critique, they can be applied to anything, really. And that's the important thing. When you come to a situation, regardless of what it is in the field that you're doing, you describe what's going on or describe what you're doing. You analyze how you got there or how it was done, how it happened. Then you interpret what could it mean, what's the relationship to the result that you want to get. And then the 4th is you evaluate, is it successful or not? And if it isn't, how do you fix it so it is? And that those 4 steps can apply to absolutely everything. So I'm shifting gears a little bit. Now we're going to come back to getting ready for the contemporary processes in conceptual art. Everything else that we've worked on, we've created objects that are specifically their own thing. And with conceptual art, the finished object that's made is the imagination of the viewer. It's the new thoughts that you've given the person who's seeing what you're doing. And to kind of introduce that idea, I have a video that is really important. It's only about 4 minutes long. We're going to watch it. Again, if it doesn't make the cut for our YouTube video, it's also going to be in our assignment. I'm sorry, our attendance assignment. So make sure that you watch it. And after we get done watching this, Emily and I are going to talk about it for just a minute.
What is reality? Knowledge? The meaning of life? Big topics you might tackle figuratively, explaining existence as a journey down a road or across an ocean, a climb, a war, a book, a thread, a game, a window of opportunity, or an all too short-lived flicker of flame. 2,400 years ago, one of history's most famous thinkers said life is like being chained up in a cave, forced to watch shadows flitting across a stone wall. Pretty cheery, right? That's actually what Plato suggested in his Allegory of the Cave, found in Book 7 of the Republic, in which the Greek philosopher envisioned the ideal society by examining concepts like justice, truth, and beauty. In the allegory, a group of prisoners have been confined in a cavern since birth, with no knowledge of the outside world. They are chained facing a wall, unable to turn their heads, while a fire behind them gives off a faint light. Occasionally, people pass by the fire carrying figures of animals and other objects that cast shadows on the wall. The prisoners name and classify these illusions, believing they're perceiving actual entities. Suddenly, one prisoner is freed and brought outside for the first time. The sunlight hurts his eyes, and he finds the new environment disorienting. When told that the things around him are real, while the shadows were mere reflections, he cannot believe it. The shadows appeared much clearer to him, but gradually his eyes adjust until he can look at reflections in the water, at objects directly, and finally at the sun, whose light is the ultimate source of everything he has seen. The prisoner returns to the cave to share his discovery, but he is no longer used to the darkness and has a hard time seeing the shadows on the wall. The other prisoners think the journey has made him stupid and blind and violently resist any attempts to free them. Plato introduces this passage as an analogy of what it's like to be a philosopher trying to educate the public. Most people are not just comfortable in their ignorance, but hostile to anyone who points it out. In fact, the real-life Socrates was sentenced to death by the Athenian government for disrupting the social order, and his student Plato spends much of the Republic disparaging Athenian democracy, while promoting rule by philosopher kings. With the cave parable, Plato may be arguing that the masses are too stubborn and ignorant to govern themselves. But the allegory has captured imaginations for 2,400 years because it can be read in far more ways. Importantly, the allegory is connected to the theory of forms developed in Plato's other dialogues, which holds that, like the shadows on the wall, things in the physical world are flawed reflections of ideal forms, such as roundness or beauty. In this way, the cave leads to many fundamental questions, including the origin of knowledge, the problem of representation, and the nature of reality itself. For theologians, the ideal forms exist in the mind of a creator. For philosophers of language viewing forms as linguistic concepts, the theory illustrates the problem of grouping concrete things under abstract terms. And others still wonder whether we can really know that the things outside the cave are any more real than the shadows. As we go about our lives, can we be confident in what we think we know? Perhaps one day a glimmer of light may punch a hole in your most basic assumptions. Will you break free to struggle towards the light, even if it costs you your friends and family? Or stick with comfortable and familiar illusions? Truth or habit? Light or shadow? Hard choices, but if it's any consolation, you're not alone. There are lots of us down here.
I really like that short video. The allegory of the cave starts a discussion about what is reality? What are the things that we talk about when we talk about stuff? I've been to other countries, and when I try to get ready to go to other countries, I try to do what I can to learn enough of the language so I can say, please, thank you, and where's the bathroom? I find that those are the most important phrases to know. But what is interesting to me is I do my best to try to speak whatever's spoken to in wherever I go, but most of the communication is done in things outside of words. You can have a conversation with somebody if you know just a few words in their language, because I've heard it anywhere but 80 and 95% of our communication are things like facial expressions, how we move our hands, what we look at, what we point at, all those kinds of things. And has that been your experience, Emily, as well?
Yeah, especially with kids who don't speak much that I work with at work. We don't really, they don't really have any first language sometimes, and we don't really need to as long as we can figure out nonverbal cues from each other.
Have you ever had an experience where somebody was getting very frustrated
Yeah.
communicating with you, and then everything became clear because you realized that there was a big difference between what they were trying to communicate and what you were understanding?
Yeah.
Um, there's an episode of Star Trek Next Generation where Counselor Troy explains the problems of translating by what she's saying. You know, when somebody hands you a cup of tea and then uses a word you don't know, the word that you don't know, it could be tea, it could be cup, it could be hot, it could be here, it could be would you like this? You know, there's lots of different kinds of things, and that's, I think, why we depend on so much other information when we are communicating.
For sure.
But I like the allegory of the cave as an introduction to conceptual art because, again, conceptual art is all about what are you doing behind somebody's eyes? What are those kinds of things that you are addressing? And a lot of the times when people are working on this, there's two directions people can go. They can either turn it into some sort of propaganda message, or, and I think this is the right direction, they can leave the door wide open for interpretation so that whoever encounters the work that you do, they can take it in any direction that they want to. And I'm going to share an example. This is the example that I am offering in the assignment description. Joseph Kossuth did a series of these, and it will make sense. I think it makes a lot of sense after you watch that Allegory of the Cave video. This is his 1 and 3 series. And he did several of these. And this is called 1 and 3 chairs. So, Emily, where are the 3 chairs?
There's the physical one, the photo of one, and I think that's like the definition of one on the wall.
That's right. And so, and even then, you know, and we can start dissecting this almost immediately because this is the quote unquote real one, but we're still seeing it as just an image. So we still see it as a photo. So we're saying this is a photo of a photo. And then this is a photo of the definition. Now they could all be chairs because here's a physical chair that somebody in the gallery can sit on. But this is also a chair because it's an exact image of this. And then this technically is also a chair because it is the definition of a chair. However, this is not going to do very much good if we want a place to sit down.
It's true.
You know, so it makes us think about, well, what is the reality of the chair? And this ties directly into the allegory of the cave because when we start talking about the theory of forms, this is where everything supposedly is defined by how we relate to an idealized a perfect sample of that thing. For example, we know that this is a chair because the idea is that somehow in our subconscious we have an idealized version of a chair. And theologians would talk about how that idealized chair is actually resides in the consciousness of deity. And we're tapping into that somehow. Now, whether or not you subscribe to that, I don't really care. But it is important that you're able to think about that idea and relate to it somehow as you step into the conceptual art that we're going to be doing. Because the chair, he's done this, Joseph Kossuth did this with several different kinds of chair. And you know that there's almost limitless variety of the kinds of chairs that people can use and sit in. And sometimes there's even chairs that people label as chairs that we can't physically use, that are designed to make us think about what a chair could actually be. And those are all ideas that I think are important. As you are exploring this perspective of conceptual art, those are all ideas that I want you to be aware of and think about. And as we go back in the module as well, I want to show you some of the artists that you're going to be looking at. Go to the background for contemporary process and conceptualism. There's several different really interesting videos right here that just talk about people using different materials. But then we start going down Jean-Claude and Christo. I hope that this website works. Okay, yeah, this is their website. And you can scroll through it and look at the different kinds of things that they've done. And this is the kind of thing that I want you guys to explore when you look at Jean-Claude and Christo. What they were really good at doing is wrapping objects. Placing objects in odd places is one thing, but also wrapping things. And as they were wrapping things, there's a particular part of your brain that forces you as a human to react to an object that's been wrapped in a specific way. Emily, when you look at this, what is the first thing that you want to do?
I kind of want to push it, see what's inside, if it's going to be hard or soft like a package.
You want to find out what's hidden. They are engaging you, and they are directly engaging you to interact specifically with their objects, because the first thing you want to do as a human being is find out what's under the wrapping. And I think Jean-Claude and Christo are amazing for that. And these other artists, some of them will do the same kind of thing, but also others of them will engage different aspects of explorations on where that meaning is. We chose all these artists not because they give you something specific thing to think about, but because they all engage you in the process of thinking and asking yourself, well, what are they talking about? What do they mean? What are the things that are important to them? Like Angelica Arendt, she makes things that look like really odd, abstracted undersea life, or things like that, or really weird objects. And the objects are not intended to give you a rationale for some. Emily, I think your speaker's on as you're working on stuff.
Sorry, I'm cutting.
But Angelica, she creates things specifically to make you want to engage intellectually with the materials that she's using, which I think is really interesting. Rinaldo does that too. Pam Bowman will make objects that are specifically designed to monumentalize and reframe how you relate to maybe the ordinary. Maybe objects that specifically make you think that ordinary things may not just be ordinary things. Maybe they're more important than that. And we look at Judith Scott, I think she's one of my favorite artists as well, because what's fascinating to me about her is she had a sister who remembered vaguely having a sister growing up, but she didn't know where she was. And when her parents died, this sister found out that Judith Scott was actually, she was born deaf, and she was born developmentally challenged. And her parents were told, you just need to put her into the state institution because she'll never function in society. But Judith's sister remembered her. She found her again. She pulled her out of the terrible place that she was in, and she put her into an assisted living environment and just started interacting with her all the time. And Judith Scott went from almost entirely non-responsive and emotionally shut off to somebody who just loved life entirely. She was still not very verbally interactive, but she had so much energy, and she started creating and started wrapping objects with yarn and made these huge cocoons that are just fascinating. So definitely look up Judith Scott. And as you explore each of these artists, think about what are they doing that makes them conceptual artists, and what are they doing or what parts of conceptualism are they bringing in to play? And I just think it's really fascinating to see what these different artists do. And two of the assignments that you're going to have, one of them is you're going to be making your own ready-made, and we talked about what ready-mades are right here. Another thing you're going to be doing is creating your own cocoon or wrapped object. And these things, what a lot of people have a tendency to look at these and just dismiss them as, really short projects. It's not that important. I want you to very much watch these two videos. One, I think this is Marcel Duchamp, and then this one, she talks about what conceptual art is. I want you to take this seriously and think about it. there are two different portions to this, the conceptual art things. I'm sorry, two different portions to this ready-made assignment. One portion is writing about it. Another portion is taking a photograph and writing 3 paragraphs about it. And then the second one is sharing this and responding to 3 of your fellow students. For this particular assignment, what you're going to be doing, this first part, this section is you're going to be selecting a ready-made. You're going to be taking a photo of it, as like a fine art black and white photo is really good. Or you could do, fantastic. One of the best ones somebody did was they took that 1 and 3 chairs concept. They hung a shoe by a shoelace. They set up a mirror so you could see a reflection of the shoe. And they set up a light so you see the shadow of the shoe on the wall. And they took a photo of that with the mirror image, the shadow, and the shoe itself on the same photo. And it's really a good photo. But then I want you to write 3 paragraphs about it where you are discussing how you are recontextualizing the object that you've chosen to make your ready-made. So that's what this part of the assignment is. And then the second part is a discussion where you submit that and then you respond to other 3 of your fellow students and what they've done. And this response is a 25-word post where you are drawing from elements of those 4 tools of artistic critique. And you're going to do that for each of 3 of your fellow students. All right. Emily, I hope, does that make that kind of clear?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. All right, so we go back. So that is one part of the contemporary processes. Ready-made and conceptual art. And then the other one is the colorful cocoon or wrapped object. And again, I want you to take this seriously. These are stick Indians that Jason made. And again, we'll talk more about this next week. And these come from a series of nightmares he had growing up, where these sticks were actually ambulatory in his dreams, and they terrified him. So when we look at this, you can see that they are sticks, but he's done things like this. He's wrapped it with a light blue electrical tape and then bound them together with yarn. Here, he's wrapped each of 3 different sticks with completely different material and zip tied them with complementary color zip ties and then combine them all together. And on this, he's kind of fused these together where each of these is covered with completely different material, each of the sticks, and then he's bound them together with something else. And with this, I want you to particularly harness your Judith Scott and Jacques-Claude and Christo vibes that you learned about in the background portion to this module. And I want you to spend at least 4 hours cocooning something. And I'll show you some of the best examples that I've seen in this class. This was a Trapper Keeper notebook that the person wrapped up with yarn, objects, and all this other kind of stuff that made them think about the time in their life when they had a Trapper Keeper. I don't know if you guys did. I mean, that for me, it was really popular. 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, 7th, 8th grade, 8th grade, where I wanted to prove to the world that I was a really studious student. And that's what this person, I think they tied in a lot of that. They brought in a lot of childhood toys, did a really good job. Some of the most important elements of the cocooning is you do this to the original object that you're cocooning. You can't tell what it is by the silhouette alone. You're fundamentally transforming its silhouette. This may mean putting several objects together, or it could mean using objects to help you as you're wrapping or cocooning whatever it is that you're wrapping. The person took a teddy bear, and they actually walked around a park and then used all the garbage that they picked up to wrap the teddy bear. And that's what this is. It doesn't even look like a teddy bear anymore because of all the stuff they've done. And this is one of my favorites where, yeah, you can still tell it's an ironing board, but they use shrink wrap and then an hair dryer. And this has become almost this kind of creepy memory holding web spider's nest kind of concoction thing where all these symbols of memories are wrapped in and suspended with this shrink wrap. And by heating it up a bit with a blow dryer, you've got this really creepy spider nest feeling to it. And I love this. But these are the things that are common, that they've transformed fundamentally the silhouette of the object, and they've put in that time. They've consciously thought about what are they wrapping and what are they wrapping with. So, and you're going to be doing that, and then the next part of the assignment is you're going to be writing 3 paragraphs and submitting that as well. And then we also have a discussion where you're just loading this. You don't need to respond to anybody else's work, but you are loading photos for your colorful cocoon, and you're loading the 3 paragraphs that you wrote. All right. So overall, it's going to be 2 photos and the concept, and that's what you're going to be submitting to the discussion. Emily, does that kind of make sense, or does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that sounds like a really interesting project.
Okay, so both of those, those 2 things are going to take, with the writing and everything like that, and the thinking, both of them are going to take about 4 to 6 hours. And that's what I want you to be mindful of. Because what you'll find as you're doing this is if you do not spend the time, you're not going to be happy with it. And if you think you're done and you've only spent an hour and a half, go back over it, rework it, and spend more time on it until you get the minimum of 4 hours in. All right. And what's going to be interesting about that, especially if you think you're done after only an hour, you're going to find out that there's a lot more going on than what you had originally intended. And it's going to be pretty amazing. So, like, for example, when you're doing the ready-made, really think about the object that you might want to use and why, and then really pay attention to setting up the photo. And it may even help as you're doing this to talk with somebody about what you're doing. A lot of the times that helps quite a bit. I did have a student. One of the things that I did originally when I was doing conceptual art was I would have students start with an idea and then turn it into an event, creating some sort of a display, and then just in their description, they would share how people interacted with the conceptual art. And this one person, I think she still thinks conceptual art is a waste of everybody's time, but at least now she respects some of the conceptual artists that before she just utterly dismissed. What she did was had several people suggest random titles, and she put those on slips of paper and put in a hat. She went and she spent $10 at Deseret Industries buying as many objects as she could for $10. Then she had some of these banquet tablecloths, the really cheap plastic ones. And there was some sort of a neighborhood event where she invited people over. And before they came, she put she set up a couple of banquet tables with those tablecloths, put these objects up evenly spaced, and then randomly pulled the titles that other people had given her out of a hat and set those titles up in front of each of these random objects. That was not the conceptual art. What the conceptual art was was she interviewed each of those people and just asked them to tell her what they thought about her art show. And it was fascinating to her how much of that the individual was expressed when they were telling her what they thought about the art show, because she had put no thought into the art show itself. It was random. It was just there. And any of the meaning that it had was meaning that was ascribed to it by the people that came to the art show. And she had some really, some people talked about, oh, it's all a commentary, tongue-in-cheek commentary on politics today and divisiveness. Her daughter was really happy because she said, oh, Mom, you finally got what art is about. And it was hilarious to her because everybody put their own meaning into it. And I think that's really fascinating. We don't do that anymore, but that does give you kind of a window into what the kinds of things that conceptual art is about. All right, well, that is all that I wanted to cover today. Emily, you said you might have some questions later on. What kind of questions do you have?
I was looking at the project for the end of the semester called the Mighty Voltron, and it talked about like combining some of the projects we did, like the paper mache sculpture and the wire sculpture and potentially the structure with the skin. But I didn't see any examples, and I was really curious what that would look like. So do you think there will be more explanation on what to visualize for
Well,
that?
I will talk about that more next week, but primarily the idea is after you do your paper mache on the foam sculpture that you carved, what you're going to be doing, since you did the tile and color, you're going to be applying, or the texture and color, you're going to be applying color and texture to the paper mache and just putting as much on it as you possibly can. To the point where it may not even feel like the original foam carving that you started with. And some of the things you can do to apply texture is if you want to use up some of your previous sculptures and apply that to it, you can do that. If you don't, that's fine too. We will go through and look at more examples of this next week. Please remind me about that so I can make sure and do that. But I will show examples. I think one of the worst examples, and you guys can hopefully just have a mental image of this. When it came time to do this, there was one student that just took about 20 pieces of masking tape, tore them off so that they're about 2 feet long, and essentially just draped them over their object and said, okay, that's my texture. That doesn't cut it because they didn't think through anything about what kind of color schemes they might want to use, what kind of textures. They just used masking tape, and it looked terrible. It looked exactly as bad as what you think. Some of the really cool ones that people have done is one person decided they wanted to have analogous around warm and neutral tones. So we're thinking like cream to light brown. And they were a cosplayer who made and sold fur accessories for cosplay. Like if the person's character had what looked like an animal type mane or something like that, she would make manes, tails, fur capes, different things like that. So what she did was took a lot of her failed projects, took pieces of that and put those different kinds of fur type textures all over this thing. She broke up some CDs that she had that she thought were related. And so she had these reflective shards of CDs that she added as a texture. And she put those on kind of like really uncomfortable scales because there were shards that went everywhere. And then she spray painted it with different shades of cream and light brown and noticed that the spray paint did different things to the CD material than it did to the firm material. And so she just did several different layers of the spray paint. So it started developing its own texture as well. And it was really a fascinating sculpture. Again, it doesn't have to mean or be anything. It is an exploration of application of color and texture. And other people have taken their wire, cut it up, and attached that to their object in different ways to make a really interesting texture to it. And other people have all done that and added elements from their structure and skin project to add additional texture to it. So it really makes it a very interesting piece. But it's something that where you do it, come back a day later, do some more, and keep working on it and put in the time. Because if you put in the time for it, it becomes something that is very different than what you intended, the originally intended and planned out. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, it sounds like it could be pretty a variety of outcomes.
Yeah, it can be really interesting. And I will open up a couple previous semesters so you can see successes and failures from other classes.
Okay, that sounds good.
That's all right. Well, thank you very much, Emily. And
Thank
when
you.
I submit all this, we're going to have a really short video that was the introduction to the class tonight. Then the internet cut out. We're going to have the longer video, which is what we're doing right now. And then I'm also going to include a link to the allegory of the cave, just in case you want to watch it by itself, or YouTube did not allow me to upload it as part of the class discussion or today or this week's class. So that's what I will do. I also wanted to reiterate that the zeros that people might see in their grading is simply because that assignment was not turned in. Get those assignments turned in that you finished, and as soon as I see them, I will go through and change the grade. And again, make sure that your biomorphic abstraction is graded before you apply the paper mache. And let me know if I have not graded it and you want to get on paper mache, email me and I will do it as fast as I can. All right. All right, Emily, if there are no more questions, I hope you have an absolutely wonderful week and weekend, and I will look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you. You too. I hope you have a good night.
Thank you. You too. We'll see you.
Bye.